Welcome to this week's edition of the Reporter Roundtable. This is our opportunity to pull out the reporter notebook and see what kind of stories we've been working on this past week, and certainly another exciting week, whether it's happening in policy or planting progress or what's happening in the markets. No shortage of news that's happening. I'm Don Wick, along with Kara Hart, Randy Coonan, and Megan Overby. Let's start by talking about what's going on with getting this crop in the ground. One of the crops that's making some tremendous progress, Randy, has been sugar beets.
Yeah, I think when I did the last sugar beet report, most of the co-ops here, I think by the end of this coming week, will be 95% done. There may be a few straggling spots here and there that need to get finished, put in. But for the most part, the beets are in the ground, not doing a whole lot yet. It's been so cold, so they're not germinating yet, which is probably a good thing with these cold temperatures we've been having.
No doubt. Corn and soybeans, this seems like this is the week when that really kicked into gear. What have you seen, Megan?
Yeah, well, especially in our area, I'm just a little bit west and south of you guys, about 90 miles. But really, this is the first week most farmers, I would say anywhere in this northern half of the northern plains, down in South Dakota, southern Minnesota, they've been planting corn now for a couple weeks. But up here, this far north, we still deal with some of those cooler soil temps. But corn is finally going in the ground. I would say soil temps are hovering around that 50-degree range. But overnight, we're still getting some temperatures below freezing in the far northern areas. So a little bit of caution is being used there by those farmers. Most farmers have their small grains in. So like I said, moved on to corn. The very first of the soybeans are actually starting to go in as well. We're also hearing more west and south of some canola seeding that's ramping up this week. So I would say, especially by next week where temperatures are looking just a little bit warmer, we're going to start seeing a more variety of crops go in.
We've had some of that wheat been in the ground since before Easter. So we need some heat to get it up and going and get us off to a very good start. Drought seems to be always top of mind as we look at this time of year. Kara, what's the latest on the drought story?
Well, Don, it's interesting. You mentioned wheat before we talk about this drought situation. I'll just add that we visited with North Dakota Wheat Commission's Erica Olson this week, talking about spring wheat emergence. It's very spotty across North Dakota, at least. And I think in Minnesota, they're seeing some of that spottiness as well. Most of the state is dry, and we think that is having an impact on some of that spring wheat stand that's coming up out of the ground. Now, there is an area in the southeastern part of North Dakota that is doing probably pretty well if you've seeded spring wheat in that area, but other farmers in North Dakota are expecting a very uneven stand, worried that they'll end up with two different crops. Now, things can certainly even out within the growing season, but right now, we don't know what that looks like. I think the latest drought monitor showed an increase in the extreme drought conditions we've seen in North Dakota and also South Dakota too. A little bit of, I think it was more the severe drought conditions increase in Minnesota, but Minnesota is doing a little bit better considering how dry the Dakotas are right now. Now, to western North Dakota, farmers are trying to get a crop seeded. I visited with Garrison, North Dakota farmer Lance Zimmerman this week. He is actually attempting to plant canola, and Megan had mentioned some canola seeding taking place. He's one of them. Conditions are tough. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you go on our Facebook page and scroll down to his story, you can see a picture of one of his fields, and the soil is very, to me, I would describe it as clumpy. Randy was describing it more as like a dirt clod kind of scenario. It looks dry. It looks very dry. He said these are some of the driest fields he's ever seen in his more than 20 years of farming. It's being compared to the 1988 drought, except the difference, according to Zimmerman, is that the dryness in 1988, they actually had moisture in the fall. The last time his farm got meaningful precipitation was in June of 2020. So it's really tricky. And if you go south of that, in Mercer County, Dean Cannell, who farms near Hazen, said he's not seeing the dirt clods in the fields, but there is poor soil to seed contact right now as they get that crop seeded. And the small grains were seeded about 3 weeks ago, but he also said emergence on those really weren't great. So that's what I've seen going on way out west. We talk about those farmers that are in the really dry conditions. I've also had farm broadcasters ask me in the last few weeks, are farmers thinking about not even getting a crop seeded. Is that even a possibility? And when I visited with Zimmerman, I asked him that question, and he said some farmers have talked about it. There is an option on prevent plant, like a drought option, but he said you don't get much from that. So crop insurance may be a better bet for some of these producers if they have to keep moving forward without many rains the rest of the growing season, or rather planting season.
Well, grass is short too. It's been tough on our cattle producers. Megan, what are you seeing on that front?
Yes, well, I had the opportunity to talk with North Dakota Agriculture Commissioner Doug Goring this past week. And just to go specifically into the North Dakota drought numbers, all of North Dakota is either abnormally dry or in some level of drought. Extreme drought conditions increased 2% this past week. There was a jump of 7% the week prior, putting nearly 85% of the state in that extreme drought category. And Goring described the drought situation as every farmer ranch's situation is very different, but there's definitely some tension and anxiety along the countryside. You talk about livestock, Don. I know it's tough for our crop farmers, as Kara just mentioned, but ranchers, have spent so many years building their genetic base for their herds, and we know those genetics aren't cheap. And, that's also a wealth of generation. If those livestock leave our state, that has a huge economic impact if they have to disperse of their entire cattle herd. So that's just, like I said, a wealth of generation that is not there in our state anymore. And so Goring did remind us of a couple of resources available for livestock producers. First, they did reactivate the drought hotline. That came about in 2017 when we saw drought conditions in the western half of the Dakotas back then. There also is the Drought Disaster Livestock Water Supply Assistance Program. I know that's a mouthful, but just go Google the North Dakota Water Commission Board. They'll have those program details and that drought hotline available on the North Dakota Department of Agriculture website.
It seems like we're seeing a few more cow-calf pairs and cows coming to town as well.
Yes. So every Thursday evening, Friday morning, I like to look through the livestock market reports of the auction barns that report to USDA. And one number that really stuck out at me, and I had to go on their website to find it, but at Stockman's Livestock Exchange in Dickinson, North Dakota, they had 2,600 head of feeder cattle, but they also sold 1,050 pairs of either pairs, cow-calf pairs, or females. 236 young cow-calf pairs averaged $1,720. Bred females were ranging from that $900 to $1,300 range. In South Dakota, not seeing as many pairs move through, although a lot of those auction barns way out west don't have their sales until today. They pretty much moved all their feeder cattle through already, so we may start seeing some special sales out west in South Dakota. But for instance, Hub City Livestock at Aberdeen had 5,500 feeder cattle yesterday. Mitchell Livestock Auction saw 2,200 head.
Talking markets, Randy, it's been another crazy week. We saw spring wheat top $8 last night. Corn's been at 8-year highs. It's phenomenal what's been happening in this marketplace.
Boy, that's for sure. Fresh highs actually in every contract in Minneapolis wheat. We did also see fresh highs in September on forward in the Kansas City and Chicago markets as well yesterday, and just tight supplies. We just kind of trying to keep up with corn and soybeans, I think, a little bit here in some of the spreading action, but it's the beans and corn that have been driving everything. Lately, it's been the new crop months, which has been a little bit unusual. We had seen the old crop months being the leader because of tight cash supplies. It seems like the new crop months now are starting to play catch up, trying to buy acres.
So demand obviously is very strong yet as well. China's been very active yet in this marketplace.
Matter of fact, we just sold 1.36 million tons of corn to China this morning in a flash sale. That's all new crop. We did have cancellation. China did cancel some old crop corn yesterday morning. And then there's some unknown sales as well here this morning. And they're thinking that could be China again, but of that, some of that's old crop, some of that's new crop again. So yeah, we're still seeing the exports at a torrid pace here.
One of the analysts this morning saying we sold more corn so far this year than we've done in the last 20 years combined, which is pretty dramatic. Of course, next week we've got that supply demand report. That it's going to be a big one, I would guess.
Typically, that report's not really a big market mover, but this year I think anything's possible because of the tight supplies. I think we'll get numbers out of Brazil. Everybody's kind of watching to see what happens, what USDA does there. Everybody, when I say everybody, I mean the market analysts are expecting USDA to increase exports. Everybody says they have to because of what has been sold so far, just for them to come up with the proper numbers here at the end of the marketing year.
So let's switch to some policy news if we can. Secretary Vilsack, part of a news conference with others as part of the Biden administration with a 30 by 30 initiative. Kara, what's part of that story?
Thanks, Don. It's interesting to see how this Biden administration is approaching the climate situation. And earlier on this year, when President Biden took office, he issued an executive order with a goal of conserving 30% of the nation's lands and waters by 2030. And this report that came out, officially released, we've been waiting for more details for a little bit on it, is based off of that. So it's a 22-page document. So, I mean, if you certainly want to go read it, you are welcome to do that. You can find that at rrfn.com. What I saw was one specific area of focus for the administration, an area they want to address, includes rewarding conservation efforts of farmers and ranchers through existing USDA programs. It's a little vague on some of that. There are some details ironed out within the report. I think a lot of ag groups are pretty pleased to see that in the report, but they want more details, and they also want to see how this is going to be implemented. One other thing to note with that is that the campaign establishes an interagency working group to create a conservation and stewardship atlas. And that will kind of take a look at the areas that maybe need the most attention or the administration thinks that need the most attention within how to address and improve lands and waters in the country. Every year, a group of agency leaders, including Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack, will issue a report. And the first one that they're going to do is at the end of this year. I visited with Jim Callan on Thursday, an ag lobbyist. We were talking about it a little bit, and he said, essentially, there's no formal process for ag groups at this time to give feedback on this preliminary report. We'll see what happens going forward. So that's what we know about 30 by 30, Don.
Andy, I think it'd be hard to get a lot of excitement when these commodity prices are the way they are to be retiring land or taking land out of production.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, we saw that with the CRP acres keep continuing to come down because commodity prices are higher than what those rental rates are. So I think it'd be very hard to get anybody that that wants to farm to set land aside, especially when they can make money at it.
Small refinery waivers also a part of the story, Carol?
It is. And before we get to that, I'll say I was reading, I think Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack has said before that this 30 by 30 wouldn't necessarily be a land grab. We'll see what happens in the implementation piece of it. So small refinery exemptions. So Trump administration issued 3 small refinery exemptions right before they left office at the very end. And this week, the EPA filed a motion to vacate those 3 small refinery waivers. And the 3 exemptions were essentially given to Sinclair Oil. I think a lot of folks that are pro biofuels, pro ethanol, are really pleased to see that. It will be interesting to see how Michael Regan continues to handle the biofuels discussion moving forward. But it seems like, based off of a few of his comments that he's made already and actions EPA is making like this one, maybe it could be a more favorable administration or a more favorable EPA to biofuels. We'll see.
Interesting. Certainly the administration's been focused on COVID and the whole vaccination process. Some interesting stats this week for rural America. There was, I think, almost a third of the folks surveyed saying that they definitely would not or likely would not be getting the vaccine in rural America. So perhaps a little more education is going to be going on in that part of the world.
Yeah, it's a good point. I haven't followed this issue super close, but then we kind of watch it as it goes. But it will be interesting to see how all of this transpires. I think in Minnesota, they're going to be trying to encourage more people to get the vaccination. in the next few weeks too. So in the next few months as well.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of outreach on that as well. Certainly a lot of stories going on at whether it's news, markets, weather. We bring you up to date here on the Red River Farm Network. Thanks to you guys for giving us some insight in what you guys have been working on this week.
Yeah.
Those are the stories we're looking at. This is the Reporter Roundtable on the Red River Farm Network.